Okay, we are rolling again. Ready? Picture it. BookTok 2025. You're curled up on the couch minding your own business when suddenly your screen lights up. With a dramatic slow motion video, the author in a velvet cloak stares into the camera, holding up a leather-bound notebook like it's the Holy Grail. The caption says, "This is the fantasy series that will change your life forever." You pause. You think, well, who doesn't want their life changed forever? The next video, same author, now with thunder and storm sounds, clutching a sword prop and whispering, "The darkness is coming." By the third video, you know how this story goes. Readers are swooning, fan clubs are forming, and somebody is probably planning a tattoo. And then the twist hits. The book isn't even finished yet. Sometimes it's barely written. What you've been watching all along isn't the story, it's the marketing. That's the world we live in on BookTok right now, and today we're going to talk about why it's a problem. Welcome to Bookish Dialogues with Tabatha. I'm Tabatha Whiteside. I'm a Christian, an author, an artist, a mom, and I have been working in marketing for over 10 years. I also happen to hold a master's in film studies. Here on this channel, I like to settle in with a cup of coffee or tea and explore books, stories, and culture through the lens of faith, creativity, and a life in Christ. Because of my background in both marketing and storytelling, I've got a unique angle on today's conversation. The problem with how books are being marketed on TikTok, often before they're even finished being written. So if that sounds interesting, well, get cozy, stay inspired, and stick around. Section 1. The BookTok Dream. BookTok has exploded as a place for authors to market their work. The promise is intoxicating. With the right clips, the right trending sounds, the right hook, you could become a 6 or 7 figure author. And in some cases, it works. We've all seen breakout successes. But here's the catch. Much of that success doesn't come from book sales alone. It's often combined with coaching services, brand deals, or other income streams. That's rarely made clear by these coaches who tell you how to market your book on TikTok. Now, one book that comes to mind in a lot of these circles is 7-Figure Fiction, How to Use Universal Fantasies to Sell to Anyone by T. Taylor. It's treated as almost a secret playbook for guaranteed success. And I have read it, and I can understand why it would be helpful in marketing your book. The issue that I have with it is that it is heavily focused on trope. So if your book does not fall within a certain or any kind of trope, then you have a problem. And the issue that I see with the way Taylor talks about her books is that she almost starts writing a book based on the marketing plan that she has for the book. Now, I just have a problem with selling the idea that you can be a multi-figure self-employed artist to people. Because we'll talk about this a little more later, but it's almost become the idea of being an author has almost become a get-rich-quick scheme. Like, do these certain things and write these certain books and you can get rich too. And we're going to talk about Audra Winter. So, I mean, it's in the title of this video, and we will talk about her, okay? And her marketing, the whole debacle that she has found herself in. But right now we're giving the foundation of what it's like on BookTok right now, okay? So again, I've read the book. It's got insights. There's a way that you can't use it, but it's very specific to a sort of style of writing. But it doesn't replace the craft of storytelling. In fact, it doesn't even explain the craft of storytelling. It doesn't make you a better writer. It makes you a better marketer for your writing if you write within a certain framework. But that framework, and this is my personal opinion, doesn't always give you great stories. In fact, some of them are quite terrible. But they sell because people are attracted to different tropes. And that book focuses heavily on tropes. It uses tropes to sell books. And of course, she calls it universal fantasies or butter. But in the end, you're selling a trope. It's trope selling. And tropes sell no matter what. You just have to know what trope you're actually selling. Like, people enjoy knowing what to expect from a story. That's why tropes work. Tropes give them what to expect. The problem is that they box you in. And not that a box is bad, but they give you an early success through views and likes, but no guarantee that you're a talented writer or that you have talent when you put pen to paper. And we've seen this in Audra, okay? Now, I do not think that Audra was or is a marketing genius. Again, we'll get to the case study of Audra Winter in a couple of sections of this video, because the broader thing is the problem with book marketing on TikTok, and we're going to look at Audra Winter as a case study. Okay, so she was able to sell quite a lot without giving anybody any idea of what her writing was like. Okay, that brings us to section 2, the problem. Here's where things start to unravel. The dream on BookTok makes writing look glamorous. But the reality is often the opposite. Books don't appear overnight. They take months, sometimes years of drafting, revising, cutting, and starting over. But on social media, the process gets flattened into aesthetics, a cup of coffee, a laptop, a good, quick montage, and this creates a few problems. First, it gives aspiring authors the illusion of progress. Posting about writing feels like writing, but filming yourself typing isn't the same as finishing a draft. Let me say that again. Filming yourself typing isn't the same as finishing a draft. Talking about characters isn't the same as developing them. There's a dopamine hit when it comes to likes and comments, and that can actually replace the slower satisfaction of doing the work. Writing takes a long time. It takes discipline and dedication to not only the story you're writing, but the craft itself. If you don't understand the foundation of storytelling, and in our language, English, that's English grammar and punctuation, like the whole bit. It's understanding themes and where, like, the logical, sometimes illogical, but like the way that a story should go, what the reader is expecting, so that by the time they get to the end of the story, they are happy with the ending. They are satisfied with the ending, I should say. Because it doesn't have to be a happy ending. Not all books end in happy or with happy endings. But if the ending doesn't match the expectation that the readers have, it's going to suck. Right? And in the case of Audra Winter, in the case of the Age of Scorpius, because of the tropes, the motifs, what Audra had people hook onto, and then what was delivered, this idea that she had been working for 10 years on this book, and that there was something going on with the literary agent that she had. Like, it caused people to latch onto a story of Audra and rooting for her. And then they got the book and they realized that maybe they shouldn't have paid as much as they did for this book. Like, is the one Goodreads review that I read said it reads like it was written by a 12-year-old. The second problem is it feeds into the performance trap. Instead of writing for the love of the story, people start writing for an audience. They're chasing engagement, not depth. Every chapter becomes potential content, every scene a TikTok trend, and that's a lot of pressure to put on a fragile first draft. We are spending a lot of time creating content about something that we're creating, which puts more pressure on the thing we're creating to create the content around. And a lot of times we're too busy making the content than we are making the original creation. Does that make any sense to you? But anyways, when you're working on the first draft, it really should be a relationship with you and that story. Because you can be a pantser and you can be a plotter. But your first draft is going to change the idea of the story that you have. It is. Okay? It's going to change. And that's a good thing. It means that the story is getting better. But if you're constantly redoing the first draft, as some people, Audra, do, then you're not getting better. It's not intentional practice, intentional mastery of the craft that you're doing. Okay? And if you are telling people about it before you really know about it, that's a problem. Now we're on the third problem. It sets up what I'll call the burnout cycle. When you market a book before it's even written, you create expectations, and expectations are heavy. You're not even finished. You're not just like writing for yourself anymore or writing for the story. You're writing to live up to a brand that you built, and that pressure can lead to rushed work, unfinished projects, and stories that collapse under the weight of hype. Finally, the fourth point is readers feel the fallout. They invest early, emotionally, or even financially with pre-orders, and when the final book doesn't match the image, the expectation, trust is broken. And trust, once broken, is very hard to rebuild, as we've seen with Audra. The heart of the problem. The dream looks beautiful, but when it becomes more about selling the lifestyle than doing the work, it leaves writers burnt out and readers disappointed. The problem is that authors are being taught to prioritize marketing before their stories are fully developed. It creates an ecosystem where readers are sold hype before substance. The result? Books that feel rushed, underdeveloped, or inconsistent because the pressure to deliver on the promise is stronger than the time given to the craft. And this is where Audra Winter truly comes in. Section 3, the case study. Audra Winter. At the beginning of this issue with the Age of Scorpius, after it had pre-ordered and people got their copies, there was discourse saying that Audra Winter was or is a marketing genius on BookTok, that she created a marketing scheme and plan that got readers into spending their money to buy this book. A closer look shows a more complicated story. Even Audra Winter herself has admitted that she didn't really have a cohesive plan. She didn't have this great marketing background.
Even getting on TikTok and talking about it, a lot of times I get a lot of comments that are like, how did you market it like this? And my genuine answer to that is I don't know. I get on here and I talk about what I've done to get to this point and the different things that I love about it. It carried me far enough to get that many sales and to get that many. And I had the sense of understanding that I had never felt in my life before.
From the beginning, she stumbled into trends, tested what worked, experimented with different topics and approaches, and she did what T. Taylor would have told you to do, which is latch on to a trope. People love their zodiacs. They might not give two poop loads about what their horoscope says. They might not actually buy their zodiac merchandise, but they're interested. Okay, it has something to do with them. Oh, I'm an Aries, that means I'm fiery. Cool, that makes a lot of sense. I guess I'll just live into being fiery. But so she's got this book about the zodiac system and fighting against what you're being told to do. A resistance, if you will. Okay? Her first couple, not couple, because there's about 4 videos are of her zodiac system. This is where she really begins to gain popularity. People love learning more about themselves, even if it's not actually about them. If they think it is, they love it. This is where the universal fantasies and the trope marketing comes in. Now, I don't know if Audra Winter read Miss T. Taylor's book. I don't. I don't know if she really understood or understands why her TikTok initially popped off. I don't think she does. But it did. And I can tell you why it did. Because she hit a bunch of people in the heart, in the feels, in the place that says, oh, I can see myself in this content. Maybe I could see myself in this book that this girl is writing. Oh, she's an underdog. I love rooting for an underdog. We, as a culture, love to root for the underdog, the person who's not winning but has the potential to. Okay, the person who has dedicated years of their life to a single act. And so she hit all of the markers that we as a culture, as a society, love to root for. A young person who's trying to put their craft that they work so hard on, who's just under hard knocks. Like, she hit them all. She didn't really probably realize that she did, but she did, okay? Now, her book, The Age of Scorpius, gained traction. The marketing wasn't calculated, as people often assume, as I've sort of stated already. Her journey mirrors the fear of missing out culture that drives BookTok. Videos spread fast, readers feel the pressure to grab the next big thing or be with the next greatest author. Authors, in turn, feel compelled to constantly produce, tease, and deliver, even if the book isn't ready. So then there's a shift where she goes from being an author to an entrepreneur, and there's an entrepreneurial focus over writing that Winter seems to be concerned or concentrating heavily on. She has her focus, or her narrative then becomes it shifts from talking about sort the idea of her book to talking about 15 plus artists who are working with her on the book. And then about being a debut entrepreneurial author who has now has a business, right? And she highlights a decade-long world-building efforts of her artistic vision and the extensive team that's involved in building this vision. There is this built-up anticipation. It may have diverted attention from ensuring the manuscript itself was ready for readers.
Severe and critical error in my book. During the process of being thrown into the position as a business owner in April and May, I was also in the final copy edit and proofing stages of the book. From the amount of shock and exhaustion I was going through, I failed to give that critical process my full attention and fell short without even realizing it until after the book was in people's hands and this all started.
Now, this is part on the BookTok readers not making Audra sort of prove that we should trust her writing skills, but it's also on Audra for not ensuring that her debut novel that is building up an immense amount of hype around it is actually ready. Now, there is some evidence that she knew it wasn't ready, okay? And we'll get to that. Like, there's some evidence that shows that she kind of knew things were a little iffy, to say the least.
Quite honestly, I'm still not. I had to go back to my parents because they were concerned about me. Everybody else was concerned about me because everybody in my...
Before the release, she admitted fearing that readers would dislike the book. She even posted clarifications on her writing style, signaling her awareness that the story might not meet the expectations that were being produced, like from potential readers, okay? In other words, she knew the book wasn't fully polished, yet she chose to lean into pre-release marketing and social media buzz. And then we get to the reception and the fallout. So when The Age of Scorpius launched, reactions were mixed. Okay, some praised her innovation and ability to generate visibility, but many readers expressed disappointment. Okay, and that's who counts when you're trying to be an author, are your readers. Critics included repetitive dialogue, inconsistent pacing, and editing issues. On Goodreads and TikTok, the reviewers commented that the book didn't even meet the standard implied by its marketing hype, with one remarking that, again, it read like it had been written by a 12-year-old despite 10 years of preparation. Winter responded to the criticism by acknowledging the feedback, sort of, and committing to revise and re-release the book. She stated, "I want to give you the book you deserve, showing an awareness that marketing alone can't sustain a project. The product itself must deliver," which is great. Except she hasn't. She hasn't delivered any bit of content so far that has built up that trust that she broke from not making sure that her book was ready for the world. She broke the trust. And then she continues to not really recognize that it's not the artistry of the book, it's the simple writing. If she is an author, then she needs to take authorship of the book. And maybe my advice would be to fire the artist that she's working with, even fire the editor she's working with, or lay them off for a time so that she can really work on the story. It's got a pretty good foundational idea, and people were, quickly after the release, rooting for her to do the right thing. And now nobody thinks she's doing the right thing, and that's because it's more about money now, because she has all these artists in this business that she's more focused on continuing than the actual story that the business is based off of. It's called the World of Guardian LLC. Where do we find the World of Guardian? In the story, The Age of Scorpius. I'm not trying to be condescending, I promise. This is just how I talk sometimes. Anyways, we can learn some lessons as independent or debut authors from Audra. Audra's story underscores the complex dynamics of attention-driven marketing, how visibility and virality can generate initial interest, but success is fleeting if the content doesn't match expectations. So her journey illustrates the tension between entrepreneurial ambition and artistic execution and serves as a cautionary tale for authors navigating social media marketing. Hype can affect or attract eyes, but the work itself must hold value. Let me say that again. Social media marketing can attract eyes. It can bring hype to attract eyes, but the work itself must hold value. If you are trying to be an author and from that create a business of being an author, of selling your books and your stories, then your work as an author needs to live up to the hype that you produce from the marketing. And it's really hard to do that if you've not finished even the first draft of your book. Let me give you a little bit of an example. My husband is a musician, and his band Desolate Tomb used to be under the name Horcrux. There was a time back in 2018-19 that he told his fans that he was going to be releasing a full-length album, I do believe, and he did not have the full-length album written, mixed, or mastered, or ready to go at all. But he gave a date. I told him this is really dumb. He has since learned to take my advice when it comes to this stuff. Because what ended up happening is he would spend 1 week writing, recording, mixing, and mastering a song. And he had to do that for months, I think. For at least 1.5 to 2 months. That's all he did. And it's not that great. It's not. Like, he's got a lot of talent, but it was rushed. And so because it was a rushed job, it wasn't that great. He wasn't able to spend and dedicate the time to the project like he should have. Now, you can examine it with another full-length album, one of his last full-length album. He took the time. I think he took about a year or a little longer to write, record, mix, and master that album, and it was completely ready to go, marketed for months before the pre-order, like the pre-release of the album. And it sounds much better. Now, there's a bit nuance. He's much better as an artist, a musician, much better as an audio engineer. So there was practice involved, but there was also enough time for him to work through all of the kinks of his songs. Okay, that's what we as writers, and really anybody who is starting out and wanting to go the indie self-publishing route, you have to establish yourself as a writer. And the way to do that is to put out good writing. And if you're constantly more worried about your marketing than you are about your writing, then maybe you should either reprioritize or find something else to do. Section 4, bigger picture, why it matters. So why does all this matter? For authors, it creates burnout. If you're trying to sell your book before you've crafted it's leading to books that don't match the hype. And for readers, it creates disappointment. They buy into a story that sounded thrilling and wasn't given the time or care to live up to it. And for the industry, it reinforces the idea that speed and virality matter more than the story and substance. This is a problem. Okay, we as humans are storytellers. We love to communicate and relate and understand each other through storytelling. It is the way that humankind has interacted for all of time. All of time. It is the way that God Himself communicates with us. He gave us a full-on book that He uses to tell His story, His love for us, His grace for us, His desire for us to come back into a right relationship with Him. Now, I know that you might not be all into religion and stuff, but again, this channel is looking at things through faith, creativity, and a life in Christ. So, it's how I view everything. It is my worldview. Okay? So, when we are constantly making content about creating something, then we're not giving the time that is needed for the thing that we're creating. Okay? And when we don't give the time to the thing that we're creating, we're like, okay, now it's time to actually put it out into the world. Readers see that it's not that great. You lose trust. And the more indie authors who lose trust of readers, the less trust there is for people who are actually taking the time to make a great story and trying to go the indie self-publishing route. Because there is burnout that will happen from readers. We see things and we get emotionally involved or financially involved in these stories, and then we're let down over and over again. And it doesn't matter whose face it is that's letting us down or which book or story is letting us down. We're getting let down enough. We start to make the connection. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. Fool me 3 times, that's not going to happen. While publishing has always wrestled with marketing versus the craft, TikTok accelerates it. YouTube Shorts accelerate it in a way that we've never seen before. One thing I keep seeing online is the obsession with shortcuts. How to write a bestseller in 30 days. How to get 10,000 readers overnight. How to make 6 figures from your book this year. It's like the craft of writing has been reduced to a get-rich-quick scheme. And look, I get it. People want to provide for their families. They want the freedom of self-employment, and those desires aren't bad in and of themselves. We don't want to be the starving artist. Okay, I get it. But if the profit becomes the only motivation, the art dies. Now, from a faith perspective, this isn't new. Jesus Himself warned us that you can't serve both God and money. And when we write only for money, we risk turning our calling into an idol. Writing, like any vocation, is supposed to be about stewardship. I have this saying that I live by. It's on the banner of my YouTube page. I've had it everywhere for years. What we are created by the Creator to be creative. That's part of what this channel is about, is showing us how to be creative for the Creator. If you have been given an idea for a story, then you need to take the time to flesh out the idea for the story. Have the dedication to honor this story and and put in the work that needs to be done to tell the story. Now, it's not always, more than likely, it's not always going to be a quick success. I've written a devotional. I wrote this devotional about 6 years now, and it didn't really go anywhere. Nobody bought it, as far as I know, so I can't get into that Amazon account anymore. Except for my mom. My mom bought it and she printed it off so that I could have a copy of the first thing, I'm not gonna cry, the first thing that I wrote and published. But again, in success, it didn't go anywhere until last year when I offered it as a freebie. I was like, hey, I wrote this thing. And from it, I gathered a good amount of people on a newsletter. So while I didn't see the initial success that I had hoped for at the beginning, some success did come later on. And that's how it is for a lot of writers, a lot of books. That's the beauty about book writing, is they'll live on longer than you do. Okay? Like, they will live on longer than you do. People will find your old books generations after you have written and published your book. There will be a copy of it somewhere. And that's really cool to think about. But it's also a little scary, because that means maybe it's the only thing you put out. If it sucks, then people are going to think badly about you. If you didn't put the time into the craft like you should have put the time into the craft, people are going to think you're bad at the craft and think, how did this book ever get published? We don't want that, okay? We don't want that. Now, again, writing, like any vocation, is supposed to be about stewardship. It's about cultivating the gifts that are God-given for us with diligence and integrity. And yes, sometimes that leads to financial provision, but other times it's about impact, legacy, and obedience, even if the maker doesn't reward it immediately. I think about Abraham a lot. Abraham lived a life of legacy and trust in God. God told him, hey, go to this land that I'm going to show you. You're going to have a lot of descendants, and they're going to take over this land, but you're not going to see it. Abraham was more concentrated on being obedient to what God was telling him to do and about the legacy of honoring and trusting in God than about getting to the promised land. Now, there was some humanness in his story, for sure, because he was a human. But I think about that when it comes to my own legacy. There's a possibility that I write a story or I start a script that I don't finish, but one of my sons or my daughter does. Do you get it? Like, I might not finish this story, but it might not be a story that I'm meant to finish. I'm simply meant to start it. You know, I think about Paul. I do think about Paul, but I mean Saul from the Old Testament. And there's this story where he's been told to go to the Amalekites and take the city out. Like, don't leave a single thing behind. Humans or animals. Like, everything needs to be destroyed. Nothing needs to be kept. And he doesn't do that. He keeps the best. He keeps the king alive. And then he keeps the best of the livestock so that he can give a sacrifice, an offering to God. Samuel hears about this. And so he goes and he's like, what did you do? And Saul says, hey, I did what God said. I went to the city and I took it out. But then we kept these things, like this livestock, so we can give an offering and a sacrifice to God. And Samuel says, it's much better for you to be obedient to what God is telling you than it is for you to offer sacrifices. Your obedience matters more. Writing the story, starting the story, understanding the craft matters more than the financial provisions that could come. Okay, which is a hard pill for us to swallow. I understand. It is not easy to think about what you're doing in terms of legacy, in terms of eternity. And to hear someone say that you should be more focused on obedience than financial provision when maybe you're in a situation like I am. My family is a one income family. We have 3 kids. And my husband does well enough for us, but not so well that we can save money or pay off debts or anything like that. So the temptation to want to create and write stories in order to make money always comes up. And it always scares me because I personally don't want to be so focused on the money that I lose sight and heart of what it is that I'm doing. And so I stop a lot because I can see that, like, oh gosh, I'm starting to think a lot of bad thoughts about myself. So that might not be good. But also, is this going to get me the follower count that I need so that I can start monetizing the thing that I'm doing? Okay, it's a very real struggle I mean, come on, like, we're human, and I am a worker. I want to be able to help provide for my family. Okay? So I get it. It's not easy to have the mindset of, I just have to finish this. I just have to keep going. I'm only in a race for myself. That's not easy. Okay, I get it. But, we have to look at things through the lens of eternity, through the lens of legacy. The shortcut that culture tells us to sprint toward instant results, but faith teaches us that true fruit comes in season, after pruning and watering and time. So while the world shouts, hustle harder and faster, I'd argue that the writer's path, specifically as a Christian, is closer to tending a vineyard. It's slow, it's faithful, sometimes hidden, but the harvest worth it. We have to take the time to honor the story that we're writing. When I taught video production at a university and in my film studies, I just always point out that if it helps push the story along, it's vital. And you don't know if it helps push the story along if the story you're focused on is your marketing, your TikTok marketing, your vanity metrics of views and clicks and likes and comments saying, yeah, I'm so excited about this book. Yeah, I didn't even know this existed. It doesn't, because I've not finished writing it. But thank you so much for the vote of confidence. I'll get back to writing eventually. Section 5, the faith and creativity lens. Here's something I've noticed. Maybe you've noticed it too. A lot of aspiring artists, a lot of aspiring authors on BookTok don't actually seem to love the act of writing. They're not chasing the joy of crafting characters, building worlds, or shaping sentences until they sing. What they're chasing is the lifestyle, the dream of being self-employed, working from home, and making bukus of money off of their books. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with wanting your art to support you financially. That's a good and worthy goal. But when profit becomes the only innovation or motivation, the heart of the work changes. The story itself can become more like a product than a place of art rushed out because the algorithm demands it, instead of nurtured because the story deserves it. In my undergraduate studies, one of my minors is a philosophy and religious studies minor. And one of the things that I hooked onto was this idea from the Stoics. It was sort of about discovering if what you want to do is really what you should do. And they used a thought experiment. So in the thought experiment, you would imagine yourself being an Olympic athlete. You wanted to be an Olympic athlete, okay? But it was to realize that being an Olympic athlete is not about the glamour of winning the medals and the glory and the fame that comes with being an Olympic athlete. What makes someone an Olympic athlete is the years of training it took to get to the event, the blood that was shed while training, the time, the energy, the sweat that was poured out of their body while training for the event. Now let's think about this in terms of writing. Writing, being an author, is not about being someone as famous as Stephen King. Stephen King is sort of an outlier, in my opinion, because he had a successful first book. That doesn't happen very often. Now, he did have some writings that were published before his first book was published, but he's sort of an outlier. Most authors want to be an author to write stories, whether or not, or good ones, whether or not they have fame, whether or not they have a lot of money. So think about what it takes to become an author, to become somebody who understands the art of storytelling. It is time, dedication, and discipline to reading and learning about the craft, and then intentional practice of the craft, spending your time working on a story or stories before anything's ever published. It's the hours outside or away from the public eye of you and your pen and paper or your computer, typing away, putting ink of some sort on a blank page. It's not about the highlight reel that we see on TikTok or the dream of working in pajamas with royalty checks rolling in. It's about showing up every day, wrestling with words and being faithful to the craft, even when it's hard, even when it's not glamorous. And that's my encouragement to you. Fall in love with writing first. Let that be the foundation. Marketing does have its place, and marketing in and of itself is not bad, but it should follow the story, not the other way around. There's a saying of too many cooks in the kitchen. Have you heard that saying? If it simply means that there's too many people working on this one project. If it's your idea, and this is sort of the problem that we're seeing after the release with Audra Winter, there are too many cooks in the kitchen. She's the author. She needs to work on the story. She doesn't need 15 plus artists and an editor writing the story with her. The things about her idea of this multi-disciplinary experience is a pretty cool idea. She's not the first to do it, but it's a cool idea. The thing is you need to have the story put together before you do that. There's steps, there's an order to it, and the way that she seems to be going about it is not really the best way to do that, but that's Audra Winter. For you, when you commit to the craft, when you love the work itself, that's when your writing gains the strength to last beyond trends and algorithms. That's when people stumble upon your book and it becomes a thing that changes their lives for their life. Conclusion and takeaway. So what do we do about this? If you're a reader, be discerning. Ask yourself if the hype matches the heart of the book. If there's anything out there that the author has put out that shows you that you can trust their writing, be discerning. Writers, resist the pressure to market before your story is ready. Your craft matters more than your clips. And as for BookTok, well, it's not evil. There's not a problem with it. And it's not useless. It's just a tool. And like any tool, it can either build something lasting or cut corners that collapse later. And you get to decide, as the author and the marketer, which one you're going to do. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy conversations about creativity, culture, faith, well then subscribe and stick around. We'll write again soon. Okay, I think that was pretty good. Cool.